What's with this blood pressure business? You know, they take your blood pressure and they tell you it's too high, and then they give you a pill for it. You didn't feel anything before, you didn't feel anything after. But then they check your blood pressure and maybe it's down. It's called the silent killer. But it doesn't only kill you, it can knock out your brain. People who have high blood pressure have 10 times the incidence of white matter lesions in their brains that lead to Alzheimer's. 10 times. And guess what? When they studied these people that had Alzheimer's lesions in their brains from hypertension and they put them on blood pressure pills, the blood pressure pills did nothing to slow the rate at which the Alzheimer's lesions were collecting in their brains. In fact, certain of the pills, like diuretics and ACE inhibitors, made it even worse, accumulated faster. So really, pills are not the answer. The real answer is to change the lifestyle that caused both the Alzheimer's lesions in the brain and the high blood pressure. Pushing down the blood pressure artificially is really causing troubles for your brain. What is high blood pressure? We'll use the NIH publication definition, and it's normal if it's below 120/80. Upper number is called systolic blood pressure. Lower number is called diastolic blood pressure. We usually write them with a line between them, like a 120/80. Pre-hypertension is when you go over 120/80. And then stage 1 hypertension is when you get up to 140/90. Then stage 2 is 160/100. The reason we put the two stages is that when you get up this high, the complication rate accelerates. Now, this JNC7 NIH publication is sort of the standard in the medical field as to how you're supposed to treat it as well. We'll get back to that as we go along here. 1 billion people around the world have this disease. So if you have it, you're not alone. And people who live on mountains have less of it. People who live down by the sea and eat a lot more salt have more of it around the world. Almost a third of adults in the United States have high blood pressure, but only 68% are being treated, and of those, only 64% are having any good results. And so, in reality, a very small portion of hypertensive people are either treated or having any success getting the pressure down. There's two types. Primary, meaning they don't know why you get it. We're going to dispel that myth tonight. Then there's secondary, meaning we know why, and it's usually secondary to some other disease, thyroid, kidney, parathyroid, diabetes, or whatever. Sometimes you get it because you took another pill. Well, let's see. Oral contraceptive pills make your blood pressure go up 4 points. Antidepressants double the risk of hypertension. Anti-inflammatory drugs, like a baby aspirin, make your blood pressure go up. And acetaminophen, also Tylenol, will do it to you. So this is, it's interesting. I mean, the list is very long of other drugs that cause high blood pressure. All right, cut heart disease risk in half if you can lower your blood pressure by 20 points. And if you lower it by another 20 points, you can cut it in half again. Lower it by another 20 points, you cut it in half again. You keep cutting it in half. So we're trying to get blood pressure down so you don't get the complications. And 115/75 would be quite good. Your brain suffers more than just white matter lesions. You get strokes when the pressure goes over 120/75. And so if we can lower it, then we can get your stroke risk down by 90%. They looked at the United States and said if we could lower the average national blood pressure by 5 points, we could decrease the number of strokes happening per year by 23,000. Also, high blood pressure destroys your kidneys. People who have normal blood pressure save their kidneys. That's an interesting association. We talked about cancer the other night, but normal blood pressure reduces the risk of endometrial cancer by 70%. Probably the association between the lifestyle it takes to push the blood pressure up also pushes up the risk of cancer. Now, erectile dysfunction. 32% more men with normal blood pressure get it up than men with hypertension. So more motivation toward lower blood pressure. Now I'm going to use a little diagram like this to illustrate blood pressure. And I kind of use the pump model because blood gets pumped through the heart and pumped out. And I'm going to use this to help illustrate how blood moves through the circulatory system and how different things can change your blood pressure. So you'll see this from time to time come up. And does that make any sense at all? A pump pumping blood? Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right. Now, people who drink plenty of water have lower blood pressures. People who don't drink enough water have a problem. The blood doesn't make it to the top of their head. And your brain is fairly sensitive to not having enough blood. About 40% of the blood in your body goes to your brain. And if that gets decreased because you get low on fluid, the blood's having a hard time making it to the top. Oh, I can't get the blood to the top of my head. So the brain says, hey, turn up the pressure. We need more blood up here. And so the heart starts going faster, and all the blood vessels in the body tighten up, and then the blood makes it up to the top of the head. But lo and behold, you go to the doctor, and he checks your pressure, and you have high blood pressure. Well, because you haven't been drinking your water. And so the drug guidelines say the first line therapy is to use a diuretic. Okay, what's a diuretic do? Well, it gets rid of more water. And so you're dehydrated more. And when you're dehydrated more, you go home and you're not feeling too good, but okay, pressure's supposed to come down. You go back to the doctor and you check your blood pressure. Not only is it still up, but your heart's running faster and your blood vessels are tightening up. And he says, oh, your heart sure is going fast. The next drug you're supposed to use, according to the guidelines, is a beta blocker. What's a beta blocker do? It slows your heart down. Okay, now my heart's going slower. Still haven't drunk any more water. But at least my heart's not going so fast. But still, the brain's not getting any blood up there. So all the blood vessels in your body tighten up, sort of like a toothpaste tube, to squeeze the blood to the top of your head. And you go to your doctor and your blood pressure's still up, and he takes your blood pressure. Oh, you got high blood pressure still. Well, I have a number of patients on 3 blood pressure medications. And so the next line drug is a calcium channel blocker. What's that do? It relaxes all those blood vessels in your body that were tightening up so the blood would get to the top of your head. I had one gentleman who was on 6 blood pressure medications and still not controlled. Well, I was giving this talk out in Arkansas, and a lady on the front row says, oh, she raised her hand. She was all excited. Oh, she says, last week, my mother called me. She's 83. She says, Nancy, my blood pressure is 160 over 100. What do I do? And Nancy says, well, Mom, I'll be over in about 45 minutes. In the meantime, I want you to sit down and drink 3 big glasses of water. Okay. So Mom sat down, drank 3 big glasses of water. When Nancy got there and checked her blood pressure, it had dropped to 130 over 70. Wow. Okay, well, I don't want to leave the impression that all blood pressure, all hypertension is dehydration, but there's an awful lot of it, and it's not treated right. You can use all kinds of interesting nutraceuticals to try to treat your hypertension instead of the pharmaceuticals, but a lot of them do some of the same things. These have all been found to be a little bit helpful. Coenzyme Q10, fish oil, but where are you going to find a clean fish? I mean, that's... All right, garlic, grapeseed extract, quercetin, and L-arginine. There's herbs that have been shown to be helpful, rosemary, but it just acts like another drug, an ACE inhibitor. Fennel and mistletoe are really diuretics, so you just, okay, I got it from the, GNC instead of from the doctor. Well, it may not be any help. Saffron, it's antioxidant, that's good. Hawthorn berry, valerian, I mean, these have all been shown to have some effect. They aren't all panaceas or everybody on them, but we've used them before in difficult cases. But the point is, you have to find out why you had high blood pressure in the first place, because treating Dehydration with fennel and mistletoe is no better than treating it with hydrochlorothiazide or an ACE inhibitor. So we want to look and see how you got this blood pressure in the first place and what we can do to fix it naturally, and then maybe we don't have to do any of that stuff. So here's our heart pumping blood, blood in, blood out. What makes the pressure go up? Well, you make that heart go faster, and if it goes faster, it's going to pump more blood in the same amount of time. Pressure is going to go up. So anything that increases heart rate. This is an outline now, and this is where we're headed. You'll see this different parts of this chart again, so don't worry. This is not the end of this. But heart rate. And the next thing is if the blood vessels tighten up, we call it vasoconstriction. If there's a smaller hole for the blood to go through, it takes more pressure to get the same amount of blood through in the same amount of time, and so the pressure has to go up. Hardening of the arteries. And when the arteries get hardened, they don't function right. Normally, every time you have a heartbeat, the arteries sort of expand, and they sort of help push the blood along. But if the arteries are sort of like a pipe, then it resists the easy flow of blood, and the pressure has to go up to get the blood out the other end of the tube. Viscosity, or how thick the blood is. The thicker the blood, the more pressure it takes to push it through the pipes. And so if your blood gets thick, you're in trouble. And we'll talk about what thickens the blood as we go along here. And then there's compression, external compression. I mean, if we come up and grab you by the neck and put our thumbs over both your carotid arteries, your blood pressure is going to go up. Anywhere in your body you go compressing on arteries that go to places that need blood, the pressure is going to go up. Sort of like putting your thumb over a garden hose. And then there's volume. Volume overload. You get too much volume, higher volume coming into the heart, higher volume is going to go out of the heart, and up goes the pressure. And there's a bunch of stuff that causes volume overload. So let's just look at these. This is an outline of where we're going. And we'll go down each one of these one by one and talk about them. First of all, how about volume overload? We'll start there at that point. And what increases volume? Well, definitely salt. Salt and sodium is the bad thing, but salt in the diet makes you retain fluid. Water is attracted to salt. It takes water to float the salt through your body. And so any more salt that you take in will leave you more likely to get hypertension. This is a huge one. Like I said, people living by the ocean and eating more salt have more hypertension. Chilled extremities, legs and arms and whatever get cold, and the blood vessels tighten up, and it gives you relative volume overload at the heart. Kidney failure. When your kidneys quit working, you're in trouble. Now, kidneys are an interesting thing. If you are dehydrated, there's two ways to fix dehydration or relative water depletion. I'm low on water, so how do I fix being low on water? Well, I can either drink more water, which I would say would be the right way, but you can't get Americans to drink water. So the other cure is to plug the outflow. One baby aspirin, 81 milligrams, shuts down your kidneys by 40%. So guess what? Drinking water lowers the risk of heart attack. So does taking a baby aspirin. My contention is, my belief is for the same reasons. You just expanded your volume. Well, so that's not great, because kidney failure ensues. All right, muscle inactivity. When you're not using those muscles, they get stiff, the blood vessels in them get stiff, and you end up with a difficult bunch of blood vessels to pump blood through, and you get hypertension and obesity. Well, let's just look at salt for a little bit. Reducing sodium intake to 1,300 milligrams a day, about half a teaspoon for Americans of salt, would reduce the yearly death rate by 150,000. Average American gets 4 times that much salt, or 2 teaspoons. And so if we could reduce it, well, and really, this is an article that looked at this, but I would say that your goal of salt intake would be more like 300 to 600 milligrams a day, or an eighth to a quarter teaspoon of salt. And then you'd be even healthier yet. I'm not saying you totally eliminate salt, but the proportion of salt. And one of the sources of salt, of course, is all the junk food people eat at the fast food restaurant. And they found out that the more fast food restaurants in a town, the more strokes people have. Direct correlation. They can watch it at the hospital. Oh, we're getting a new such and so fast food restaurant. We'll have more strokes. Because they get all that salt, and up goes the blood pressure, and up goes the stroke rate. Now, quiz time. Which has more salt? Rice Chex cereal, breakfast cereal, out of a box, or potato chips? Rice Chex has a lot more. You have to read your labels. Which has more salt? Corn chips or tomato sauce? You're right, tomato sauce. Which has more salt? Kraft Velveeta cheese or a hot dog sandwich? Cheese by a long shot, almost twice as much. They hide salt in everything. The more processed the food, the more likely it is to have salt. And so you have to read your labels. The reason your blood pressure goes up is because of the salt, but most Americans only get about a fourth of the salt, if that, in their diet from a salt shaker. Most of it comes, 3/4 or more comes from processed foods. And it's all in there. So read your labels. Now, if you want to really cut your salt, eat vegetables that are fresh. For example, canned corn has about 10 to 19% as much salt as fresh corn. Obviously, fresh corn has little or none. So eating fresh vegetables is an answer here. MSG, the S is sodium, but MSG, sodium, along with the free glutamate, makes your blood pressure go up as well. So this is a dangerous thing. We've talked about that all week, haven't we? Okay, that's the salt. Let's talk about obesity now. For when you gain a pound of weight, when you add another pound to your body of fat, it takes an extra mile of blood vessels to feed that fat. And it takes extra pressure to run the blood through the extra mile of blood vessels. And so a 55-pound weight gain increases your risk of hypertension by 265%. So really, every blood pressure controlling program should include weight loss. A serious look at weight loss. And so if you can lower your weight by 22 pounds, you can reduce your risk of hypertension by 53%. I mean, really, we're just reversing this whole process. So weight loss is helpful at reducing high blood pressure. For each inch that you can tighten your belt, you lower your risk of hypertension by 15%. So if your waistline is 50 inches, you get it down to 40 inches, you just reduce your risk of hypertension by 150%. So it's very important to see weight control as a part of controlling hypertension. All right, kidney failure. What is the biggest cause of kidney failure in America? Animal protein. Animal protein shuts down your kidney function, again, by about 40%, almost immediately. And when you cut down your kidney function, then the fluid collects and you have high blood pressure. And so we have to look at this link because it's a very important link. On the other hand, switching from animal protein to vegetable protein takes away hypertension. One study looked at, instead of drinking dairy milk, drinking soy milk. You restored kidney function, you improved insulin sensitivity, and you lowered blood pressure. So soy milk is a way of lowering blood pressure compared to cow's milk. But you could use any milk other than animal protein milk. All right, let's talk about vasoconstriction. Tightening up the blood vessels, making the space smaller for the blood to go through. And so what causes vasoconstriction? Stress. We'll talk about stress in the section more when we talk about pump speed, but stress will do it. Cold extremities. This definitely causes vasoconstriction. That's what pushes the blood up and gives you trouble. Dehydration, as we mentioned. And then there's vasoactive substances. Coffee, tea, colds, anything with caffeine. And then nicotine. So let's just see what happens here. Now, coffee. As soon as you drink it, up goes your blood pressure. And the more of it you drink, the higher the blood pressure goes. And it does it through your stress hormones. It mimics fight or flight. It triggers the fight or flight mechanisms in your body, so that your body is acting like you need to run away from the big monster or fight him. But there's no big monster. It's just coffee going in you. And it stiffens the arteries and causes vasoconstriction. Tobacco does the same thing. Non-smokers have a 10% lower risk of developing hypertension. And the chilled extremities thing is really important, because running around without your extremities as well clothed as the rest of you doubles your risk of high blood pressure. On the other hand, going out where there's plenty of sun and it's warm, that relaxes blood vessels. And the sun produces vitamin D, and vitamin D relaxes blood vessels. Now, this issue of having big muscles, but they're sitting around doing nothing, sedentary lifestyle. And by big muscles, we don't mean that you're particularly a muscle builder. We're talking about the bigger muscles on your body, like your arm muscles and your leg muscles. And if you aren't using those muscles, they get stiff. And it doesn't matter if you watch cartoons or if you watch, soap operas. It still doesn't help. In other words, TV isn't a good thing to use to lower blood pressure, because you sit there, you do nothing, you raise the vascular resistance, up goes the pressure. On the other hand, regular exercise makes those muscles so they don't get stiff. They become more supple. The blood flows through them better, and it lowers blood pressure. Walking 10,000 steps a day, how far is that? About 4 miles. Can lower your blood pressure by 10 points. Working out for 20 minutes it lowers the blood pressure for like 10 to 12 points. So exercise is part of the solution. All right, external compression when we push on the blood vessels. What kind of things cause external compression? Well, edema or swelling, inflammation, like we talked about last night. The arteries get really stiff and thick, and the stuff compressed on them from the outside. Glycation, we talked about that on the diabetes night, where sugar collects in the tissues. Tight clothing, where you wear clothing with tight bands, tight elastic, anything that leaves marks on you. And obesity, people who are carrying an extra big spare tire out here when they lay down, the pressure goes right on the arteries going to the kidneys. It restricts the blood flow in and out of the kidneys and changes their function, and in turn changes blood pressure. Kidneys have a lot to do with blood pressure, by the way. So what about tight bands around the waist? Clothing that hangs from your shoulders with like suspenders leaves your waist more free and aids in lowering blood pressure. So they found that loose clothing brings your blood pressure more to normal than tight clothing. So suspenders. Man, notice I got my suspenders. Okay, and breathing correctly. People who breathe from their shoulders, their blood pressure goes up. Where you should be breathing is from your diaphragm, your stomach. And when you breathe from your diaphragm, so they got their arms up and they're breathing from their diaphragm. This helps lower blood pressure. Women who wear a tight bra apparatus end up not taking as big a breath with every breath. It tightens the lungs, heads you toward high blood pressure. Changes the way you breathe too. All right, now thick blood. Let's talk about thick blood. When the blood gets thick, it makes rouleau. Stress thickens your blood, dehydration thickens your blood, refined foods, cholesterol and fat, overeating, and waste products. Waste products are like when you eat a lot of food that doesn't have much fiber and stays in you a long time, and the bacteria overgrow and they put off all these toxins that makes your blood pressure go up. Here's a normal red blood cell all by itself under the microscope. Here's a rouleau of blood cells. Things that cause this rouleau are like refined foods. Oh, but aren't we refined people? Shouldn't we be eating refined foods? I get some head shaking. No. Okay. Such as oils and sugars. Those cause these rouleaux. When the blood thickens up like this, it's very hard to pump through the blood vessels, especially in the brain. And so the blood pressure goes up to push this thickened blood through your capillaries. Now, fat is particularly dangerous this way. Saturated fat, animal products, butter, coconut oil, any of these saturated fats increase the thickness of the blood and make it so it takes more pressure to pump it through the blood vessels, so you get hypertension. And it's interesting, the Bible talks about this. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, ye shall eat no manner of fat of ox or sheep or of goat. Today it might be margarine, Crisco, that kind of thing. All right. It's interesting, hogs, compared to naturally occurring vegetable oils, lard, saturated fat, significantly increases blood pressure and the risk of hypertension. And it's worse as you get older. The older you get, the more these oils affect your blood pressure. Oh, no wonder everybody gets senile hypertension. Well, as they call it, if your cholesterol goes up, it doubles your risk of hypertension, thickens your blood, and it's part of the problem. So a bunch of people said, well, let's try putting people on an animal fat-free diet and see what happens. And they significantly reduced blood pressure. They did it for 10 days. I'm not sure why they chose 10 days, but in the Bible, Daniel goes on a 10-day diet to see if he gets healthier, and in 10 days he gets healthier. And he goes on a animal-free diet, animal fat-free diet as well. Okay, but how about vegetable oils? Refined oils, coming in a bottle, increase the risk of hypertension and stroke at an earlier age. Oh, I can get my stroke at 47 instead of at 62. Just eat more oil. And that's what it turns out. All right, canola is especially bad, causing hypertension, and with salt, it's really bad. Canola is not a great oil. At least if you're trying to avoid hypertension. Eat as much canola oil as you're willing to accept the risk of hypertension, right? I was at a previous place, I was talking with a lady, and she had bipolar, and she liked chocolate, and I said, oh, just eat as much chocolate as you want to retain of your bipolar. You decide. And when you mix fat with sugar, oh, look at this thing. All right, nobody lust after the cheesecake, please. It's a deadly mix. The risk of hypertension is not additive, it's multiplied. And so this is dangerous. And sugar by itself. Let's look at the lower number. Remember we said you want 120 over, 80 at the most, but you'd like 120 over 70. Well, if you're eating no sugar, maybe your bottom number is 73. You get 20 teaspoons of sugar, and it goes up by a few points. You get 40 teaspoons, it goes up by a few more points. And an average American's getting more like 50 or 47. And so this might push you over the edge from normal blood pressure to hypertension, just the sugar by itself. And fructose is the worst sugar for this. Have I talked about fructose before? Yeah. Poison. Drinking 1 fructose sweetened soda per day increases your risk of hypertension by 77%. We'll be seeing why. It's going to come back up again. There's a number of reasons. But here we're just looking at sugars in general. Oh, but I don't drink sodas that have fructose. I get the, NutraSweet-sweetened ones. Well, these artificial sweeteners give some people high blood pressure. It's a relative of MSG. So try stopping it. Maybe that'll bring your blood pressure down. It's worth a try, huh? It's worth doing an experiment on yourself. Now, there is a good thing for helping your blood pressure, for sweetening. You want something to sweeten things with that won't raise your blood pressure? Stevia. It acts like a calcium channel blocker, relaxes your blood vessels. And so it has a positive effect on blood pressure. And I haven't seen any studies come out yet and show that it's going to kill you. Yeah, I have a friend down here, south of here in West Virginia, that grows his own stevia in his garden, just uses the leaves off of the plant because they're sweet. All right, hardening of the arteries. When the arteries get hard, the blood doesn't flow well. Plaque does this. Inflammation. Inflammation leads to what we call endothelial dysfunction. What's that? Well, endothelium is the lining of your blood vessels. Just think endothelium, inside lining. Okay. And dysfunction means it doesn't work right. Normally, the endothelium is very responsive to signals to either relax or tighten up. When endothelial dysfunction sets in, it makes the blood vessel sort of like a chunk of wax. And it doesn't want to respond to anything. It's kind of like the person who didn't get enough sleep and you're trying to wake them up in the morning. Hey, wake up! Don't bother me. Come on, wake up. You're supposed to relax. Do I have to get up yet? So endothelial dysfunction is blood vessels that aren't responsive, and we'll see what causes that here in a minute. Uric acid causes endothelial dysfunction. Inactivity makes those blood vessels get stiff. Well, we talked about inactive muscles. And glycation from diabetes. So it makes sense that if you have plaque in your arteries and the space for the blood to go through gets smaller and smaller and smaller, it's going to take more pressure to get the same amount of fluid through that smaller hole in the same amount of time. And unless you do get the fluid through that, space, you won't get enough blood to some part of your body, like your brain or your heart. And so plaque raises blood pressure. But animal products cause endothelial dysfunction. And so the endothelial dysfunction from animal products raises the risk of hypertension quite dramatically. 3 servings of meat, poultry, eggs, fish, seafood per day increase the risk of hypertension by 67%. Endothelial dysfunction. The blood vessels aren't relaxing. Pork. Unclean, huh? I just quoted what they said here in American Heart Journal. A complete elimination of pork in all forms is a good dietary therapeutic rule in the management of arterial hypertension in all patients. Salt pork is even more hazardous to the health of man. Uric acid causes endothelial dysfunction. Anything that raises uric acid raises blood pressure. So meat, particularly organ meats, anything that would give you gout. Fructose. Oh, here comes fructose again. It raises your uric acid. And it's high in corn syrup, it's high in agave. Well, how does this all work? There's a doctor out there, Dr. Johnson, who's a researcher, and he thinks that the reason we have so much high blood pressure in America, other than just eating all the salt, is from fructose, especially the rise in blood pressure in the last 20 years or 30 years. He thinks it's fructose that raises your uric acid, and so he turned around and gave people uric acid pills, or pills to lower their uric acid, and lo and behold, their blood pressure went down. And so he's made a great case for this. So really, fructose is probably the biggest cause of high blood pressure we have, other than salt and stress. Beer and alcohol beverages will make you have more uric acid. So the same diet that fixes gout, high uric acid, also fixes hypertension. So here we are. You want a gout diet? Here's the gout diet. Fruit, lemons, citrus, cherries, strawberries, grapes, apples, tomatoes, peaches, pears, melons. Vegetables, celery. Celery will come up here again. Well, we had celery on a previous list, but it'll come up here again because celery is a great one in alternative medicine circles for lowering blood pressure, and it does work. I mean, obviously, if you're going to eat 10 stalks of celery, you're not going to be eating potato chips because you won't have any room for them, right? Well, it also has phytochemicals that help as well. Potatoes, beets, cauliflower, green beans, artichoke, and nuts. Most of the nuts, but especially not the deep fat fried salted ones, but the others. And chestnuts are particularly helpful. They're low in fat, so they're beneficial. Now, alcohol. The more alcohol you drink, the more your blood pressure goes up. There's a linear relationship. Yeah, but they told me to drink alcohol for my heart's sake. Well, that's right. They, been making alcohol, and they want to get their investment money out of it. A 2-drink per day person can lower the risk of hypertension by 1/3 simply by abstaining. But what about my heart? Well, the only thing in alcohol, especially red wine, that's good for your heart is resveratrol. Resveratrol is also in red grape juice, and it's also in the grapes. And it's particularly concentrated in the skins. So if you really want the most resveratrol, you eat the grape with the skins, chew it real well, and it'll do much for your heart than drinking rotted grapes. Cell phones. You want high blood pressure in 40 minutes? It's easy. Put the cell phone to your head for 40 minutes and you get 10 points increase in your blood pressure. Comes right up. You put the cell phone to your head for 20 minutes, the temperature of your brain goes up by 0.5 degree. Oh. Use the cell phone too much on this side of your head, that's the side of your head you get the cancer, not the other side. So cell phones are sort of a hazard. Yes. Okay, let's talk about some things in your body that normally bring your blood pressure down. Antioxidants, anti-inflammatory chemicals, anti-inflammatory hormones. Melatonin is one of these. Your brain makes it deep down inside at your pineal gland. It's almost right in the middle of your brain there. Only if you did not get some bright light in your eyes during the night. If you sleep in total darkness, then you get some. Melatonin is pretty well wiped out by irregular hours of sleep and by having artificial lighting on at night. And so getting to bed by 9:30 helps get more melatonin. Getting nice sunlight during the day helps you with getting more melatonin. Being regular with your meals helps you get better melatonin. Now, inflammation causes endothelial dysfunction. Inflammation raises the risk of hypertension by 40%. Maybe when we come back next year, we'll give the whole talk on autoimmune inflammatory diseases. But you can go to my website and watch it in its current form. But the things that cause more inflammation in your body are aged foods. What are examples of aged foods? Cheese, wine, some meats, vinegar, chocolate, vanilla, miso, soy sauce. All kinds of things. Pickles. All right. What do they call that stuff? Kimchi or sauerkraut. All right, fried oils. Oh, this is a big one. When you take oils and heat them up, it makes oxidized oils, it makes lipid peroxidation, it causes trans fat, it makes acrylamide, and it gets in your bloodstream. It irritates everything, causes endothelial dysfunction, and up goes the blood pressure. Oxidized foods. Well, most processed food gets oxidized. And so you end up with more and more hypertension. I mean, anything that's sat on a shelf that's been processed, including wheat flour. The longer it's been since they milled it, the more likely it is to be rancid, to have oxidized oils in it. Refined processed foods. Really, here's the bottom line. A diet deficient in antioxidants from fresh fruits and vegetables. You can have more inflammation. So the real cure is eat more fresh fruits and vegetables. But like we said on cancer night, we do not have enough resources in America to fight hypertension. If everybody ate their, 5 servings according to the pyramid of fruits and vegetables every day, we would be out. We don't import enough, we don't grow enough for everybody to do that. But that's part of the key. Okay, and so let's just compare diets. Let's look at diets. Let's look at diets that help and hurt endothelial function. Compared to vegetarians, consumers of animal products, like milk, eggs, and dairy, eat more fat, have higher cholesterols, have higher blood sugars, and they're 6 times more likely to get hypertension. Well, let's just look at diets in general. Here's a study that looked at 5 different diets. They had carnivores, people eat mostly a lot of meat, omnivores who eat meat and vegetables, fish eaters who eat fish and vegetables and fruits, lacto-ovo-vegetarians, meaning they eat or drink milk and eat eggs and eat vegetables and fruits, and then plant-based diet people. If they looked at these and compared them, the highest hypertension rates were among carnivores. Total vegetarians had 1/4 the relative risk of hypertension. So basically you decide how much risk you want of hypertension, and then you pick the diet that will give you that risk profile and stick with that diet. Blood pressure does not have to go up as you get older. It's been proven. If you look at indigenous people like in Brazil, where they still eat lots of good things from their gardens and the jungles, their blood pressures do not go up as they get older. Average blood pressures are like 110/60. Average cholesterol is 129 points. Blood sugars are pretty low at a 55. And the body mass index is about 20, which is pretty thin compared to most Americans. Well, let's see what happens if we put a bunch of people who are confirmed hypertensives on a vegan diet. They took a bunch of people who had been on hypertension medications for 8 years. Those people are pretty well confirmed hypertensives. And they put them on a 1-year vegan diet. The majority were able to stop or drastically reduce their medications. Did it take 1 year? I was working with a program last winter where we took people in for nightly meetings like this, but we also fed them every night and gave them cooking schools and recommended what they should eat. And I was sitting at a table. I stayed at a table with 5 participants and sort of was the liaison between them and the instructor. So about 2 weeks into the program, I started asking them, well, how you, all of them were on blood pressure medications at the beginning of the program. How are you all doing? It's 2 weeks now. How's your blood pressure doing? 2 of them had gone to the doctors and gotten taken off of blood pressure medications because they're getting lightheaded and the blood pressure is getting quite low. 2 of them had gone to the doctors and got their blood pressure medications cut down either in half or down to 1/4 of what they originally had. And the 5th one was desperately needing to go get into their doctor because they were lightheaded when they got up and they needed to get off their blood pressure medication. So at least at my table, 100% reduction in blood pressure in 2 weeks on a vegan diet. So it doesn't take a whole year. All right, let's just look at vegetables that help. Green leafy vegetables. Why? They got magnesium and potassium. Spinach. Why? It has folate, helps lower blood pressure. Celery. Eat it or drink it. A lot of people use it as juice for this. Carrots, ginger, and broccoli relax blood vessels. Beets, basil, garlic. Some people use it as a supplement. It works. Or whole. If you eat it as a whole garlic, though, it helps with social distancing. And this is an interesting part of this study, that they found that raw onions, but not cooked, reduced blood pressure. So the better choice is to eat more raw food. How about fruits? Eggplant and tomatoes? Yes. The nightshades? Oh, well, I thought the nightshades would give me joint pain. No study has ever confirmed that nightshades, more than anything else, causes joint pain. It might cause it in you, but something's not a nightshade will cause it in somebody else. Pumpkins and squash are high in potassium, low in sodium, so they're helpful. Cranberries act like an ACE inhibitor. So there's a lot of nutraceutical pills that use cranberries. Or cranberry concoctions with other things. Apples and pomegranates and grapefruit. Olives acts like a calcium channel blocker. Okay, what's for breakfast? People who eat their breakfast regularly have lower blood pressures than those who skip. So making sure you get a good breakfast is part of the solution. And that good breakfast will not include boxed or refined cooked cereals. Most processed breakfast cereals, dry or hot, have a hard time sustaining life. and cause hypertension in laboratory animals. Very interesting study.
How about shredded wheat?
It's quite processed. It's going to be one of the better choices, but I say if you can look at it and identify what it is. You know, you look at granola. Well, there's an oat, there's a sunflower seed, but you look at like Fruit Loops. Well, where'd that come from? A Fruit Loop tree, you know, where the toucans live. And so choose a whole plant-based, unrefined food diet for breakfast. Shredded wheat doesn't have any salt, so that's helpful too, or sugar. Blood pressure, friendly breakfast is what you want. And so whole grains are part of it. I mean, if you switch from refined grains to whole grains, you know, the difference is like almost 90%. And so you can lower your blood pressure by switching from refined foods. And part of it has to do with the amount of fiber in grains, whole grains. Vegetable fiber, 65 grams per day, can lower your blood pressure by 12 to 14 points. Helps you lose weight, helps you control blood sugars for diabetics. Here's a very interesting study. I found this one very fascinating. Southern Medical Journal. They took a bunch of people and said, well, let's see what happens if we go on a raw food diet. So 6 months on a fresh fruit and vegetable diet, where they achieved about a 62% raw food average by calorie. Why is that significant? Well, if it was 62% by volume, it'd be one thing, but by calorie, I mean, one Snickers bar, 200 calories, one head of lettuce, 50 calories. Okay, what's 60% if I'm eating lettuce? Lots of heads of lettuce. So volume-wise, it's a huge difference. All right. So 6-month fresh fruit and fresh vegetable diet, they lowered their weight by 8 pounds and they dropped their blood pressure by 18 points. That's real good. But what really fascinated me about this study was what came out in their discussion. They said, when we did this diet like this, we had some unexpected results. Serendipitously, 80% of those who smoked or drank alcohol abstained spontaneously. Now wait a minute. Alcoholics Anonymous would be happy with at least around 10%. 8 to 10% is their result rate at getting people off of alcohol. I mean, we do a 5-day stop smoking plan, and it's a big struggle. Here we just put people on the original diet, and they quit smoking and drinking without even being told to. And they said they didn't like the smell of smoke anymore, they didn't like the taste of alcohol anymore. What's more, they didn't like going to restaurants. They couldn't stand the smell of the food, and if they did eat out at a restaurant, at a banquet or something, a lot of them threw it up spontaneously. Very interesting. You start eating good food, and the garbage food starts tasting bad. Well, it's the original diet, right? I'm sure Adam didn't have a microwave or a waterless cookware set. Fruits, grains, nuts, vegetables. The Genesis diet. Very interesting. Okay. Now, eating too much food definitely will increase your risk of hypertension, but eating less food, caloric restriction as we call it, makes the blood vessels so they're less stiff, so they can relax easier, and it lowers blood pressure. So, eat for strength and not for drunkenness. Now, water. But fasting and drinking water is a very good way to bring blood pressure down. Number of studies jumpstart your blood pressure reduction with a water-only fast. Some of the stubborn blood pressure might take a few days. But fasting 1 day a week may be more effective than pills. 1 or 2 days a week, very effective at getting blood pressure down. And very effective at helping you reduce the number of calories that you're taking in. So I recommend people drink lots of water, and one thing that's very helpful is putting lemon in the first quart of water of the day. I had a friend that sold health books. He used to travel with us and have books back in the back like we have there now. But his mom called him. Norman, I've got high blood pressure. And I've been on these 3 blood pressure pills for so long, and it never seems to control it. I go to the hospital about 3-4 times a year with blood pressure off the charts. Isn't there anything natural we can do? And he said, well, let me look at my books. said squeeze the juice of 1 lemon in your first water of the day, first quart of water of the day, and drink it down at least 30 minutes before breakfast. She started doing that. She got off all her blood pressure medications and her blood pressure went to normal. She'd been on blood pressure pills for years. Well, after about a year doing that, she kind of got tired of the acid, all the acid from the lemon. And so they said, well, what else can we do? So they looked in the books, okay, hawthorn berry. So they switched over to hawthorn berry, and that did it for her. When you drink lemon in your water, you might want to brush your teeth afterwards or rinse with a little bit of water without the lemon, because the acid in your mouth on your teeth isn't always great for the enamel.
What does the lemon do in the water?
What does it do in the water? Lemon is a great antioxidant, first of all, and it stimulates the liver to start cleansing. It lowers the inflammation in the body. Also, it thins the blood a bit with the vitamin C, which helps the blood to flow through the blood vessels better. And so that's helpful. And there's certain phytochemicals in it, like lemanoids, that must have an effect on helping the blood vessels to relax better. So a number of ways that lemon helps. All right, increased pump pressure because of increased heart rate. Notice it's going a little faster here now. And so stress. Stress is a big part of this. You get under stress, heart's going faster. Anxiety, heart goes faster. Tobacco will do this. Being out of shape, caffeine, being dehydrated. And so, well, okay, let's just look at some of these. Who has a faster heart rate? A couch potato or an Olympic athlete?
Couch potato.
Couch potato. So really a fast heart rate is a sign you haven't been exercising. But for every 10 beats per minute your heart rate is over what your normal should be, your risk of hypertension goes up by 42%. So if your heart rate is up at 90 instead of 60, you go figure, you're going to have a much higher risk of hypertension. And it has partly to do with the fact you're pumping more blood, but also your blood vessels are all thick. But what about stress? Oh, stress is a big one. Stress is a tough one. I mean, if we look at a natural disaster, Katrina, the big tsunami over in Japan, earthquake in Chile, and you follow those people that went through that, you'll find out that many people after that come down with hypertension. The stress of natural disasters, especially life-changing ones like those, leave a lot of people with hypertension in their wake. But it's not like it's going to get better. It's been predicted. We've been told, Mark 13:8, for nation shall rise against nation. You know, look what happened to, what was it, Gaddafi? And kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be earthquakes in divers places. And there shall be famines and troubles. But you haven't seen anything yet. These are the beginning of sorrows. And so we just keep our eyes open because it's not going to get better. So we have to have a plan in place for dealing with stress. Otherwise we get hypertension. Television. 2 hours in front of the TV raises your risk of hypertension by 40%. Why? Well, there's an electromagnetic field, I'm sure, but really, when you're watching that thing, the hero is either in trouble, getting into trouble, or trying to get out of trouble. And, well, life just isn't that bad. And so it's stressful. Getting behind on medical bills. Difficulty paying medical expenses associated with higher blood pressure. You know what the number one cause of bankruptcy in America is? 62 to 75% of all bankruptcies came about because of the medical bills got out of hand. More than half. More than half from medical bills. And that raises your blood pressure. So you went to the doctor because your blood pressure was high. He wrote you a prescription for a medication that's going to cost you half of your rent. You know you can't afford that, so your blood pressure goes even higher. Hypertension in the city, moving to the city, big city, increases your blood pressure by 23 points. Stress of the city. Commuting raises your blood pressure. On the other hand, getting outdoors, enjoying trees and flowers and other wonders in God's great nature lowers blood pressure and stress. So getting outdoors is part of the solution. Music, particularly classical music, lowers blood pressure. Some music makes it go up though, pop and jazz. So music can be part of the solution. Volunteering, helping others, doing something for somebody else, making your life useful by helping others helps to lower blood pressure or keep it normal. Interesting study, Psychosomatic Med Journal. Freedom from resentment, sort of a lack of forgiveness or anger, and guilt, which comes about because you did something that your conscience told you you shouldn't, lowers blood pressure. So freedom from these is very helpful. And herein do I exercise myself, to have always a conscience void of offense toward God and toward man. Being free from stress. Another study looked at forgiveness. Oh, there's a bunch of studies on this. And there's a group down in Florida that does a 6-week seminar, or actually workshop, on forgiveness. How to experience forgiveness, how to give forgiveness, what forgiveness is. And people were doing so much better physically, they decided to study their blood pressure and found out those that came in with hypertension often left with normal blood pressure. So a spirit of forgiveness has been shown to bring blood pressure down. Forgive one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you. It's part of the solution. Another study, Bible study and prayer. In stressful situations, prayer has been shown to bring blood pressure down. People who attend religious services weekly and pray or study the Bible frequently were shown to have a 40% lower risk of hypertension. But people who didn't show up at church, that just stayed home and watched TV or listened to radio of religious programming, had higher blood pressures. And then this is a very interesting study out of Minnesota, Journal of Gerontology. Older adults who lost a loved one, but who believed in a good afterlife, were less likely to develop hypertension after this stressful event than those who didn't. Well, how's that? Very interesting. So here's a Bible text. Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming, in the which all that are in their graves shall hear his voice, speaking of Jesus, and shall come forth. They that have done good unto the resurrection of life. Oh, low blood pressure. And they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. High blood pressure. So, I guess we choose now which blood pressure we get, huh? Okay, so let's fill in the outline. Anything that makes the heart go faster, stress, being out of shape, caffeine, tobacco, dehydration, raises blood pressure. Anything that tightens up the blood vessels, stress, vasoactive substances, cold on the extremities, or dehydration. Anything that hardens the arteries, plaque, inflammation, inactivity, endothelial dysfunction, raises blood pressure. Anything that thickens the blood, dehydration, stress, refined foods, cholesterol, overeating, waste products accumulating in your colon, and the Rouleau effect causes hypertension. All right, compression of the blood vessels from the external sources like edema, obesity, glycation, inflammation, tight clothing. And then there's the volume overload problem from eating too much salt or kidney failure, certain medications and animal products. Muscle inactivity, squeezing all the blood back to the heart. Chilled extremities, squeezing all the blood back to the heart. So, the fixes, in summary, get plenty of warm sunshine and fresh, invigorating air. Get outdoors. Avoid the pitfalls of tobacco, caffeine, alcohol, drugs, fried foods, fructose, sodium, MSG, and overeating. Make weight control a habit. Guard your sleep. Evaluate its quality for effectiveness. Take regular time for enjoyable exercise in the great outdoors, far from traffic, pollution, stressful crowds, and cities. Eat a delicious whole plant food-based diet, high in fiber, high in minerals and vitamins and antioxidants, low in salt, no refined carbohydrates, processed fats, or animal products. Keep well hydrated with good water. Add a little lemon too. And stress, let God know you need Him to release you from stress and guilt and fear and hypertension. Rely on Him for guidance as you come more into line with His original plan for diet and lifestyle. How's that sound? All right. Here's our website, Northern Lights Health Education. Keep posted. I'll be posting this handout on there when it comes available for tonight's lecture. Sign up for a newsletter. Watch an online video, except for this one. I haven't filmed it yet. And try a new recipe.